Hi, it's Mark Lowe with Kentucky Tennessee Research. I've got a weekend research project for you. I want to share a couple of resources, so let's get started. Well, welcome. Decided it was time for us to do a weekend research project together, and I want to start out by going through some resources and sharing them with you, and let's look at those and see how you can get started. First of all, our weekend research project is going to be just looking at World War I resources. Now, depending upon where you are and where your family might have served, that could be anywhere in the world, of course. We'll focus on some close at hand, and perhaps later we'll share some more international and other resources. But I want to talk about a couple of new things that have been compiled, and I'm always proud of our Library of Congress of putting together great research guides. So first, I want you to go take a look at this website, which is the Library of Congress, their research guides. There's the URL, and I'll put it down in the notes below. These guides talk about not only electronic and digital collections, but maps, posters, photographs, recordings, just everything that they have identified as helping you understand more about the World War I and the people and involvement and the leaders and the countries. So it's a great place to go. Just look for general information. I want to zoom in just a little bit on the digital collections. We're not even looking at all of these here, but again, to have access to some of the audio, hearing the sounds, the pictures, the maps, and including interviews. So attached to this are part of the Federal Writers Project, interviewing World War I soldiers that were taken in the 1930s. Again, so much great information. So I want you to go take some time and to go look at it and identify it. Now, one other site that I'm kind of using as a gateway for you to find some additional information is at the World War I Museum. And there's the link. I've got it. The full link there takes us to the state military records, because that's what I want you to focus on looking for this weekend. Identifying an individual, and then just begin to look, see what resources are available. Now, once we get to that process, those military records can serve as a basis for beginning research. Remember, that's just the beginning. Obviously, once we start on a situation and we've learned about an individual, that's not all. That's just the beginning. So once we begin to identify the information about the individual we're researching, then from that point we can jump off to additional records, newspapers, other records, stories about events and people, and by studying maps, the locations involved. So it can help us understand a lot more about the situation. So with that in mind, let's remember a little bit of history here, that in 1917 the Selective Service Act registered 24 million men by the end of 1918. Okay, that's about 4.8 million men served in World War I. About 2 million saw active combat. 400,000 African Americans served in segregated units, and about 15,000 Native Americans served as scout, messengers, and snipers in non-segregated units, so in specialized areas within that. So again, we have to know the history in order to find the information about the people we're working for. Now, the Selective Service Cards, sometimes known as the World War I drafts, there were 3 sets of those, or in particular, they're available in multiple places. Ancestry.com, available at Family Search, and other sources as well. But there's the Type A card. That was June the 5th, 1917. And that draft for those individuals aged 21 to 31. You're looking at a draft here, and you'll notice there's a stamp on the right side at the top that says Warren A. That is the Type A card for that date. That's actually my grandfather's draft card. Then we have the B draft. That was in June and August of 1919. That was for those who had turned to age 21 since the first registration. Okay, and you'll notice those are the dates that are on the card So just go look at them. That's kind of the process this weekend, is just learn what's there. Then the Type C card, September 1918, for those 18 to 21, and this is called the old age draft, 18 to 21, and those then that were 31 to 45. Okay? Again, looking at those, this is an actual draft registration card for George Herman Ruth, better known to us as Babe Ruth. So this is what the actual cards look like. The microfilm, or the digital copies that we use, the coloration's been taken out so we can see them. But notice there are color numbers stamped and or written. And once we get into the research, that is actually useful to us, and that we can actually, that leads us to other information. So much more to learn. Okay, one of my favorite things, and one of the great things about finding these, is once you begin to identify what's there, and that's our primary job this weekend, is just look what records are there, maybe stuff we already have. But what we call the Statement of Service cards were compiled by the War Department, but were not completed for all states. Now that's because during the earlier conflicts of war, Revolutionary War, Civil War, Spanish-American, that those things were left up to the War Department to actually compile that. So they came up with the idea of letting the states work on compiling this information, and people asking for the state for information instead of contacting the federal government. Well, obviously that didn't work completely, but these cards exist in many places, and we want to at least look to see if we can find access to them. Okay, for example, here's the card again for my grandfather, who served from Kentucky, and this is called the Statement of Service card. And basically all the information, his serial number, his location, the stuff from his draft as well, and then his actual, the organization he served with, and other information if he was overseas, engagements, injuries, wounds, etc. All of that is often included, should be included, on the Statement of Service card. So your job is on that, the World War I museum site, there's a link down there to records by state. Many of them are incomplete, but yet they exist. Kentucky is one for which it's not reported, but you see there is a Statement of Service card for my grandfather. Those are held at the Kentucky Department of Library and Archives in Frankfort. So we'll share more information about that as we go through. So begin, what's available? What is a Statement of Service card? What do they look like? And so as we begin to look, there are other states, some of whom have made them, and they're available online. There are still other states who took this information and compiled it. Tennessee is one of those, where these Statement of Service cards were extracted, and they created what they called the World War I Veterans and Ex-Servicemen Records. And they were collected by Mrs. Rutledge Smith, which basically took that information from the card and typed it up. You see that for Joseph Anderson there. The same information is included. So these have also been filmed. They were bound books and made available. They sent copies out to the counties and kept a copy at the state. So often this information exists in some form, and that's kind of where we're starting. Where is the record? What's there to help me find the information I'm looking for? One other thing, you might also be aware of the record of honorable discharge. We started recording those typically in a county court office, a Register of Deeds office, some court of record within each county. When a soldier went home, they registered in that office. Not every soldier completed them. And in some cases, these records are not readily available. They may be private because of some state laws. But many of them have been digitized. Many of them have been at least microfilmed. So those might be available, which is more complete record of him recording his DD-214, because many of those may have burned. Some may have burned in the archives fire in St. Louis. So we're working about other records first. So we can check to see if those are available. If they are, they contain military and personal information about the soldier. So much more that we're collecting and building information. Now from that point, we're also going to go into another aspect. And that's part of the aspect of what you and I learn as we find out what resources are available, we can apply them to personal people. In other words, we're researching an individual, and we can actually look for their records. Once we've identified the resources, it makes it much easier to reach out and connect those. And that's kind of the job that we have first, okay? Just begin to identify records. But one of the great sets of records that exist, unfortunately, are the Gold Star soldier manuscripts, and those would be for soldiers who were killed during the war. And so within those manuscripts, I've given you an example. This is Louis LeFew, who is from Todd County, Kentucky, which is near where I live, and he was a soldier from Robertson County. So the description of his service, a photograph was included in that record, additional information about his burial. He was originally buried in France and was brought back after the war. Those letters, documents, most of that is all included within those files. So again, not everything is online, and that's the whole point of what resources are, to give us enough information to go look somewhere else. Okay. One of the great stories about that too is when I research about Lewis and find out about that, his younger brother Newt LeFew joined the Army underage, and because his brother was overseas, he was trying to get involved, and of course he was not allowed to continue service at that point. But the photograph was made, his full plans to follow his brother into action. The stories continue. Now, don't forget, once we begin to identify those resources that we're talking about, military, manuscript, and other collections afar, don't forget that personal collections will add to the understanding of the story. This is one of the postcards, and one of the ladies, when I began to do research and talked with her, it's about 200 postcards that her father wrote to her mother during World War I, and they have the full collection. So it's a point of looking at location, plus what's going on and where the cards come from. Again, the story is there and more. It's our job to begin to look for that and try to understand what's happening. Learn more about the situation, more about the person, and that's our job. Just do a little research. So, your weekend project is to take a look at some of these resources. Perhaps you've looked at all of them. Perhaps you've done an extensive job of this. That's great. If you haven't and you just want to brush up on that, the idea is take some time to look at these resources. You don't have to get personal with the research yet. One of the best ways to sharpen your tools is just to look at resources, find out what's available, and begin to understand how to use them and how to find information. Then, when we begin to take names of individuals who either served as soldiers or their families in the community, then we know how to find them better. And we'll become better researchers just by taking a little mull and ponder time. Think about it, think twice, and then go look at the resources. So, you've got your job, you've got the idea. This time, we're going to go beyond that to World War I resources. Now, with that in mind, just follow a few of those things and look at more. If you learn of other resources that are especially helpful, let me know. Type in the comments. Get me word, and then we'll share that in future opportunities. Because our job is take a look, take a closer look, and have fun while you're doing some research. Because is there anything more fun? Anyway, have a great weekend, and thanks for joining me.